Welcome once again to the Procurement Podcast with Enim Ado. And today I have once again on the show Mr. Atoapem Frimpong Barima. And he's been on my show previously where we spoke about the disruptions in the supply chain during the COVID era. And he's back again to take us deeply into the issues about supply chain planning because without proper structure within your supply chain, you will struggle to actually know the flow or the movement of goods from one point to the other and how to be able to manage the risk inherent in the supply chain. And a good plan will enable you to know how to order, structure, and even know how to manage your warehouse and all that. So he is coming in to speak about the supply chain planning and how professionals within every area, manufacturing, oil and gas, public sector can actually have a proper structure to their supply chain. So without much ado, I welcome Mr. Atoapem Frimpong Barima to the show. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Edim.
Yeah, so without much ado, I wanted to just give us a little bit background about the supply chain planning and what does it mean to see supply chain planning?
Okay, thank you very much. So let me start by saying that supply chain starts with an end user or a customer, and then it ends with the customer. The essence of supply chain is to deliver goods or service of value to a customer or to a business user. So therefore, if we say supply chain planning, it basically means the process of coordinating and optimizing the flow of goods, services, information, and finances within the supply chains. So basically, supply chain involves either goods or service, information, and finance. So the planning centers around coordinating all these elements to ensure that the customer's needs are met, whilst at the same time, you minimize the costs involved in all these activities and also maximize efficiency. The goal of supply chain planning is to ensure that the right products or service, when I say product, it covers goods and service in a way, so the right products are available at the right time, at the right place, at the right quantity, and also meets the customer's expectation. So coordinating the activities to deliver service or goods of value, and I'm emphasizing of value. If you deliver something that is of no value to the customer or to the end user, you have not achieved the expectation. It defeats the purpose of supply chain. So the coordination and optimization of the activities to deliver these goods or service of value to an end user or a customer is what we call supply chain planning.
Wow, that's elaborate. So moving on, what are some of the importance of the supply chain planning?
So before I touch on the importance of supply chain planning, the question is that, why should we even do supply chain planning? And then what entails in the planning? We normally used to say that when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So it tells you that planning is the bedrock of every activities, including supply chain. Without planning, you cannot achieve anything of value or anything that actually you can cherish. So we have, in supply chain planning, you'll be doing what they call demand planning, where forecasting future demands for products or service based on historical data, market trends, and other relevant factors. So there's one demand planning. So there's a demand end and a supply end. So you do demand planning, you do supply planning. The supply plan is determining how to best fulfill the forecasted demand by optimizing production schedules, inventory levels, and supplier relationship. Then production planning. So you see, you have your demand planning, you juxtapose against your supply planning, then your production planning. So creating a detailed plan for manufacturing or producing goods based on demand forecast. So it's connected from one step to another. So you do your demand planning, you do your supply planning, you do your production planning, then you do your inventory planning, because the inventory planning will feed into the production. That is the BOM, the bill of materials. Then after you've produced the items or the products or the goods, you now have to do you have to consider distribution. So distribution planning is also part of the supply chain planning. Then collaborative planning involves collaboration with these key stakeholders, such as your suppliers, your manufacturers, your distributors, because you see, in supply chain planning, if you are the buyer, you are depending on the supplier. That supplier who supplies the raw materials to you is your first tier supplier. Your supplier also has a supplier who is your second tier supplier. Your supplier is a third tier supplier. Now, when you are doing the planning should go to this extent, right? And so you need that collaboration, because if your supplier fails your supplier will fail you, and it will disrupt your production schedule, and you will not be able to meet the demand. So collaborative planning is also one of the elements when it comes to supply chain planning. So with this explanation, you asked what is the importance, therefore, of supply chain planning. I will say that the reasons or the importance of supply chain planning is that when you do proper planning, as far as supply chain is concerned, you are able to meet the customer demand. That's one thing. So the reason why it's important is meeting customers' demand. So we say that supply chain planning enables organizations to forecast and anticipate customer demand accurately. If you have not planned, you will not be able to do the proper forecast to meet the demand. And this, your forecast will also align with your production, your distribution, and your inventory levels and all that. Then supply chain planning, because you've planned, you'll be able to reduce costs. That is another thing. When supply chain planning is effectively done, it helps in optimizing various processes, because you procure materials based on the demand. You will not just keep inventory that will be aging, it will be obsolete, and you have to write them off at zero just because you haven't planned. So you've procured more than necessary, especially in the manufacturing sector, let's say the food manufacturing, where most of the raw materials have expiration date or they are perishable. If you don't do proper planning, your raw materials will go bad before even you produce an item. So aside meeting customer demand, reducing cost, it also improves efficiency. It improves efficiency. So it's a supply chain planning allows, it allows for different efficient allocation of resources. Like I said earlier on, whether it's raw materials, your production capacity, because if you are expected to, the demand says that you're supposed to produce 2 million cartons, you have to look at your raw material availability. What quantity do you have? What quantity do you have to procure to augment what you already have to be able to meet the demand? Can your production capacity be able to produce within the expected time to transport to the end user, to meet the end user demand? So when you do proper planning, an holistic one, it improves efficiency. So I mean, there are a lot of importance, like inventory level optimization. Your inventory is part of your working capital. So if you do proper planning, you are able to optimize your inventory to an extent that you are not keeping more than necessary, right? For some to end up being obsolete, to be written off. You are not keeping less that you end up out of stock and you'll not be able to meet your customer demand. So even inventory optimization, working capital optimization, they are all important. They are all benefits. They are all good reasons why we are supposed to do supply chain planning.
Wow.
And supply chain planning also helps enhance visibility, because you are having that collaborative planning with your suppliers, your buyers, and your stakeholders. You are able to have visibility within the chains.
Yeah.
And therefore, if there is any issue, that bottleneck that is about happening, you will be able to find remediation to it earlier. Enough. Really enough.
Wow. That's beautiful. And when you began speaking about these things, you made mention about demand planning, supply planning, and I think inventory planning. And
Inventory
all these
planning,
things,
yeah.
yes, and all these things are different layers of the planning process. So before I go to
Exactly.
the how, you see, at what point in time must this thing be done? Or who now supervises this particular activity to get a holistic plan for, let's say, Newmont? Because it means that there are different parties to this particular plan. It is not a single person's thing to do in creating or building a holistic supply chain plan. And all these things come to play to get the right data for your inventory management, as you spoke about with the importance of the supply chain. So can you give us a bit picture what actually goes into play and the kind of people you need to be on the table to help build this structure with regards to the demand planning, the supply planning, and the inventory planning?
Supply chain involves the flow of goods or services,
Yes.
information,
Mm.
and finance. So
Yes.
planning, when it comes to supply chain, is the responsibility of every, for me, I would say is the responsibility of every function within the business. One, who will provide the money when we want to procure? It is finance. So we have to factor the finances in our budgets, right? Now, who will be using the materials? And this is generic across industries. Who will be using the materials that will be procured for production purposes or for operation purposes? It's the business user, the end user. So you must have, before the year even starts, you should know that you should have a data from the business user or the end user that you are procuring for. Supply chain does not procure for itself. So who are you procuring for? The person should be able to give you an idea of what they need in terms of volume, specification, and all that is required. So the business users who will be using the materials that will be procured are part of the planning. Based on the demand planning, based on the demand forecasts that we have received, we know we are supposed to produce this X amount to this particular market. And then, because of that, we'll be doing our supply planning, and that is where the production team will also come in, right? Finance team will come in, supply chain will come in. Even HR has a role to play, because if the volume of goods or services we are supposed to produce to meet the market demand, based on our human resource capacity, we need to hire more people. It will be the responsibility of HR. So every business function, legal will be involved, because whilst you are procuring, there will be contractual issues. But supply chain normally leads this planning. And within the supply chain, you ask about the demand forecasting, the supply planning, and then inventory distribution. In most organizations, the supply chain is structured on subdomains. We have what we call the material planning team. And when we say material planning, for me, material planning is not inventory planning. Material planning involves procurement, involves the end user, and involves free coordinators. The inventory is only managed when it arrives. So the inventory planners normally do their material requirement planning based on the triggers from the system. If it's automated, they do a review and decide on which material to procure based on the minimum level that has been set in the system and the maximum level that has been set in the system. So the supply chain team leads this planning, but other business users like the HR, the finance, the production team, the end users, legal, and everyone. That is why I say stakeholders, collaborate. You do what we call collaborative planning, which involves key stakeholders. And these key stakeholders, some of them are external, your suppliers, manufacturers, and then some of them are internal, like I've stated. So it is not a one department activity. It's an activity that involves a whole lot of different departments. But most of the key components in this planning sit with supply chain, and supply chain is also subdivided into the various functions. We have the warehousing team, we have the inventory management team, we have the transactional procurement team who procure the routine items and items of lower value, and then they do most of let me call adversarial buying. And we have the strategic procurement team who, they don't just go to market to buy, but they build relationship because they are buying the most strategic materials, the critical materials, the bulk commodities, the items that are actually running the operations of the business, and then where you need to consider total cost of ownership when you are procuring to be able to make good savings out of that. So I would say that it is a combination of effort from different departments of a business that actually ensures an effective supply chain planning.
Yeah. So I think you said it all. That's very, very true. I love to see other departments actually come into play when we get to these things, because sometimes some don't see themselves as part of the supply chain. You make mention of finance, you made mention of other business functional units within a company. If they don't see themselves as part of the entire business operation, when they ask for such as information, you may not get them, and that lack of data can actually affect the proper structure of the procurement supply chain plan. So it's well said. But
Yes, you are right.
You said something, and I'm still thinking about it. You said materials planning is not inventory management.
Yeah, material management is not inventory management. Yes, material management is not inventory management. That's what I said.
So can you be clear on that? Because when I heard that, I was like, probably when somebody hear materials management or something, probably we just say probably we intertwine the usage of words, so it may mean the same thing, but they are
Yes.
saying it's not. So probably can you be much more elaborate on that?
So I would say that inventory management is a
Mhm.
subset of materials management,
So
right?
inventory
Now,
management is a
the inventory management, subset
materials.
of materials management and
Okay,
management,
okay,
right? And then
okay,
I call it the MM.
okay.
The IN, inventory management, right? The
Mhm.
IM is a subset of the MM. The reason is this: who needs material to produce? It's a business user,
Mm.
maybe a production team. They know, they are the technical people. They know the kind of materials they require, the quality level of the
Mhm.
material they require, the specification.
Mhm.
They know the quantity that will be used to produce an X amount of goods. They would have to give you this information, this data. And based on this data, you will be able to decide on your min-max, the minimum you are supposed to procure and the maximum you are supposed to procure,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
Right. When they do this, the materials management team, they will put this into the system and they will be doing the monitoring to see if the levels are falling. And then they have to call for replenishment. And when they call for the replenishment, is the procurement that goes to buy, isn't it? When procurement goes to buy, in some organizations, after procurement has transmitted the purchase order to the supplier, the freight coordinators or expediters take over until the item arrives at the warehouse. The warehouse also takes over to keep the physical stock, right? And then they'll be managing the physical stock as it's being issued, right? And they'll be doing their cycle count to ensure that the system and the physical aligns. Now, if you look at all these people all these sub-functions I've mentioned the end user who is not a supply chain function, but is in the supply chain, the end user, bringing the information and the data to decide on the min-max that has to be set there, the reorder points and the maximum order points that has to be set in the system. I've also mentioned that there is a team that will be doing the monitoring and they'll be doing the material requirements planning reviews on bi-weekly basis or weekly basis to decide on what has to be replenished. That is inventory management. Then there is the procurement team that will do the purchasing. So if you combine the procurement team, the warehouse team, the end user who is the actual user, and the material management, the inventory management team who will be doing the material requirement planning to ensure that we do not run out of stock and will be consistent with the replenishment by requesting for procurement to procure. This team forms materials management. They are not inventory management. The inventory management is the guy who is actually checking and making sure that We do not run out of stock. We do not overpurchase for some to lead into obsolescence to be written off. So in a nutshell, materials management is broader because it entails more subdomains and even external functions. Sometimes you can even bring the supplier on board, the supplier supplying the material in the planning, so that they have some level of visibility of your stock levels. That is materials management. The inventory management is just an iceberg of materials management. And that is where the monitoring, the visibility of levels come in and the request for replenishment comes in. So that is the difference.
Thanks for the elaborate explanation on that. And I believe my listeners will understand the difference that materials management is broader and inventory management is a subset of materials management. And I think that is very clear to our listeners. So thanks for that elaborate explanation. So moving on, in typical Ghana, when we take the multinationals, we find them actually having a keen interest with regards to technology. So they try to embed technology in their operations, in procurement, in supply chain, in the operations in the company. At what point must we be critical to embed technology in building a well-structured supply chain plan?
Thank you very much. So you see, if you look at the current state where we have machine learning, we have artificial intelligence, most of the analytical works that are done cannot just be done manually. You will not be able to have efficiency. So for me, gone are the days when we were using just Excel and other softwares to do planning. Now we have enterprise systems. We call them supply chain enterprise systems. This supply chain enterprise system, if an organization can afford, I will say there is no right time than to start from day one, which I will call technological integration. You need these systems to help you. You need these softwares to help you to do your demand forecasting more accurately and more efficiently. You need these systems to help you to do your inventory management more accurately, to help you with the production planning. These same systems will help you with your data analytics. Now, if you go to most organizations, some of them are using ERPs like Pronto, like JD, like SAP, Ariba, and all those things. These things are what actually drives the efficiency that we want to achieve. So it is key when it comes to supply chain planning. You are not able to review those. Maybe you are keeping an inventory of about over 54,000. How can you review all those inventory to decide which one has to be replenished? But if you have these systems, enterprise systems in place, it will trigger what material needs to be replenished. And you do some basic manual review if you have multiple plants to ensure that maybe plant A is running out of stock, but plant B has enough quantity, which is not even moving. So it doesn't make it wise to go and buy from plant A, but rather do stock order transfer from plant B to bring to what? Plant B. You can only have this visibility if you have technology in place.
Okay, so looking at this, you are the supply chain director for Newmont. Can you give me a typical example in how yours work, how you operate within your institution?
I'm the senior manager. I'm the senior manager for supply chain operations. I'm not a director yet.
Okay,
If a director hear me say I'm a director, he would think I'm going to come for his position. So let me clarify that.
Okay, so sorry for that. So he's the senior supply chain manager.
Supply chain, the senior supply chain manager, yeah, supply chain operations manager.
Yes,
Okay, so let me give you that example. I mean, I work in an institution like BAT where we use SAP, and we use SAP also, and SAP Ariba also in our organization, current organization. And then so you see, we use the Ariba and the SAP system. That is the SAP ECC. Now we move to other levels to create requisitions, our purchase order. So we have multiple enterprise systems that have been integrated, right? And then when it comes to materials management, we are using the IBM Maximo for inventory optimization. So the IBM, you use it for all the analytics and all the insights to tell you which material is being inactive, which one is fast moving, which one is going below the minimum requirement and you have to replenish. So we have multiple enterprise systems. We have enterprise system for risk management. Previously, we were using Aravo. We have sunsetted it, and currently we are using Ariba. Ariba has a component for supplier risk management, right? So our system, when it comes to supply chain planning, it's very complex because we are using, like I told you, we are using SAP. We have a component of Ariba, which has a component of supplier for supplier risk management. We have the IBM Maximo. Formerly, we're using Oniqua, which has been upgraded to IBM Maximo, right? For inventory optimization. For analytics, we are using the Tableau. We have the Power BI for our spend visibility and our spend forecasting. So we have a lot of systems that have been interconnected, right? So like me, on a daily basis, I get a report of our service level automatically run and sent to by the system to know how inventory count accuracy, to know the critical material service level, to know routine material service level, to know the demand, material demand. We have a lot of enterprise systems. We have different enterprise systems which have been integrated, which will run reports for us on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, to be able to make proper reviews of these reports to make an informed decision. We have it across procurement. We have risk management. We have risk for risk management. We have for procurement. We have for materials management. We have for spend analysis, and all these are integrated.
Wow. And then you have a very comprehensive technology empowering you to actually plan your supply chain well.
To sound boastful, I've worked in Mantrack. I've worked with British American Tobacco. I've worked with Ernst & Young. I haven't seen any company. Maybe I'm yet to enter another company that has a robust and well-defined, fit for purpose enterprise systems for supply chain like Newmont. The only challenge is that you have to be deliberate to learn and understand how these systems operate and how they help to make your work more efficient and to help you to work effectively before you can actually appreciate its use.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Then I think I need to come and learn from Newmont.
Yeah, you are welcome. You are welcome.
You take me through the whole structure and the systems, and I'm ever willing to learn from Newmont. So I think finally drawing the curtains down to today's chat, is there any skills or attitudes a professional must have to be able to plan their supply chain? Are there any necessary skills that is needed by supply chain? Because sometimes we talk about these things and we forget the human aspect of these things. So I want to bring in the human factor where there is the right skill, the attitudes, the knowledge to be able to actually plan supply chain for any company.
Good. Thank you very much. And I think this is a very important question because supply chain, to have an effective supply chain planning, like I said, it's not a one-man or a one-department responsibility. And aside that, supply chain planning fits into what I call supply chain governance. And supply chain governance talks about processes, systems, or technology, and people. And your earlier questions and my responses addresses processes. And you brought in technology. So we wouldn't have done justice to this conversation without bringing in the people aspect, because you need the processes, you need the technology and the people to actually properly govern supply chain. And governing supply chain is synonymous to supply chain planning. So that's a very good question. And then I would say that, yes, to excel in supply chain planning as a professional, you need a diverse set of skills, and which must span across different domains. One, you have to be very analytical. When I say analytical, I'm talking about the ability to analyze a large set of data to identify trends, patterns, and insights. You see, in supply chain, when you make arguments in supply chain without data, you are just like any ordinary guy with an opinion. You must have data. So currently we are doing data-driven supply chain. The supply chain in this modern day is not just a mere supply chain, it's data-driven supply chain. So you have to have that analytical skill. And you need that technical proficiency too. You should be, like I said, The tools are there, the enterprise systems are there. But if you do not have the technical proficiency, these enterprise systems will mean nothing to you. And you cannot use it to do anything of value to yourself and to the organization. So you see, familiarity with tools and softwares for demand planning, inventory management, and logistics optimization, all these are part of the ERPs. Understanding the experience with enterprise resource planning systems is key. Aside being analytical, being able to analyze data to derive insights from it, these systems are the ones that will help you to do the analytical work. And so you must have proficiency in the utilization of the systems. Aside that, communication skills is very key. Supply chain is a chain. Now it is even gone beyond a chain. It's a web. You'll be talking to so many stakeholders, so many people. A lot of different people. Some will agree with you, some will not agree with you. So you must have a very firm and a strong emotional intelligence aside communication skills. So you should be an effective communicator because, like I said, you'll be involved with various stakeholders, including suppliers, some of them are difficult, manufacturers, logistics partners, and internal teams. You should also be able to be a good presenter. When it comes to your presentation skills, should be sharp. You should be able to tell a story from data. You should be able to make a strong case why something is supposed to be done. So your ability to present complex supply chain plans and insight clearly and understandably is also very key. Then another key factor, another key skill that you need is project management. Most of supply chain activities are projects because it has a beginning and it has an end. So time management within project management is key. Supply chain is time bound. If I need an item at 4 a.m. and you bring that at 6 a.m., it may have impacted production time. It may have resulted in equipment downtime. So our time management, our deadlines are very key. Then risk management. You should be very risk conscious. Whatever you do, you should have risk at the back of your mind because you will be depending on other suppliers to be able to execute your production and meet the customer demand. If you put yourself as a buyer or even as a supplier, you will be depending on other suppliers to be able, or other players within the chain to provide what you need to do your production to meet your demand, right? And then since you are depending on others, there's a risk that comes with it. And then this dependency is supported in theory by the resource dependency theory, that as far as you're dependent on others, there could be this risk exposure. And then there's a need also to be, have that kind of relationship building, have a skill of collaboration and relationship building. So supplier relationship management is very key. So you have that skill of supplier relationship management, where you can build and maintain strong relationship with the supplier to ensure a smooth and a reliable supply. And then as one who asks that, this collaboration and relationship, how do you build it? You can build it based on your payment terms. You can build it based on your contract duration. The longer contract duration that you may have with the supplier will no more see you just as a client, but you see you as a business partner. If you have suppliers that you pay them on time and in full, whenever there is a scarcity of material and they have other buyers, they will consider you first. And this is supported by the social exchange theory, that in the relationship, there is punishment and there's a reward. And people are always more, people appear to align more with those that give them the best resource or best outcome. So if, let's say, I'm buying from Enimado, and Enimado has about 4 different customers that buys from him, and then the payment terms, my payment term is 14 days after delivery, and I pay all the time, on time and in full. When the product is supplying becomes scarce, I'll be the first point or the first buyer that you will consider to supply before supplying the other 3 who do not pay on time. Vice versa, if I don't pay him on time and in full, and I delay his payment and it impacts his operations, when materials are scarce, any mother will not consider me. That's supported by social exchange theory. And that same relationship building and collaboration, information transparency is key. And you have to communicate regularly, and you have to communicate with open mind. And that is also supported by the information sharing theory, that the more information you share, the more visibility you'll be able to have, and will be able to actually remediate any possible disruptions that will come within the supply chain. So you need that skill of collaboration and relationship building. And then you have to be a strategic thinker. You plan long term, not short term. And aside that, you must also have a very good negotiation skills. But we see normally when you are negotiating favorable terms with suppliers to ensure cost-effective and reliability is also supported by social exchange theory. When your negotiation is more about always win-lose, with time, your suppliers may even distance themselves from you. So yes, we want to make savings, but it's important that we have to look at the total cost of ownership. We may buy things cheaply today, but let's say I'm buying a product or a part at $100, and that part will last just a week. I buy another part at $500, it will last a year. If you look at the total cost, the $500 part is better than buying that $100 part, which will last for a week. So within a year, I'll buy almost about 52 parts. And if you multiply 100 by 52, you're talking about 5,200. So in the long term, you haven't actually made any gains. So you have to have that skill, that knowledge of the nuances when it comes to negotiation with suppliers or with buyers. So there are a whole lot of skills. I mean, and some of the skills will be triggered based on circumstances, right? That the supply chain may come into contact with. But these are some basic skills that you need to have as a supply chain professional to succeed in the space.
So thank you so much. Thanks so much for the elaborate discussions today. I think it's really be insightful because at least we start on every item that is really peculiar or paramount to actually structuring a very good supply chain plan. And thanks for the insight shared today. But before I close, because my audience is much more younger. So how do we actually manage talent? I'm talking about talent acquisition because I have many people coming to me and they're asking me, they're looking for jobs and all that. And I know Newmont has a plan or a way that they bring in young or graduates to join their organization. But beyond Newmont, what can we do as a country or as a people to manage our talent so that in any time frame where there's any need for any particular job role, we can identify people who can actually fit into that or find a way to groom people to manage certain areas within the entire procurement supply chain spectrum. So how do we go about it as a country, as a people, to manage our talent?
We have a lot of talents in the system. We have people graduating with different degrees on the yearly basis. People graduating on the yearly basis on every year with different degrees. But the question is that, do we have jobs for them? There are no jobs. You advertise a single role, and you got over 500 applicants. You have to shortlist them. And at the end of the day, you have to shortlist only 5 for an interview. Just imagine, 500, you take 5 for an interview. It tells you that there are a lot of talents out there. There are a lot of people who are qualified out there academically. They may not have the job experience, but we need to give them the opportunity. So for me, I think the first thing is that we need to try to industrialize. The more we industrialize, the more opportunities we will create in terms of job for our youth. Without the jobs, their degrees will still remain a degree. They won't be able to get jobs and they will not be able to gain any experience. And then until you get a job and you start working, you realize that some of the theories do not even work. You realize that some of the things that you learned in school are different on the field. And then when you decide to go to your master's, do your master's, it helps you to actually take a problem from industry and fix it with research in academia. Yes, there are a lot of youth out there who are talented, who are smart. Hiring managers should also give opportunity to these people, entry-level opportunities, without asking for those long years of experience. The guy just came back from school. He just graduated. Yes, he's gotten maybe second class upper or first class. You want the guy, you're asking the guy for 5 years experience. You yourself, as a manager, you didn't start with a 5 years experience. You were given an opportunity to start somewhere. So, yes, we cannot pick you straight and come and make you a manager, because it is not your degree alone that will make you a better manager. There are a lot of factors which goes beyond degrees. But at least the entry level, we should give people opportunity when they apply. I have had a lot of people who have applied and I've taken them on, especially from the warehouse, because I started from the warehouse. My advice to the youth also is that they have to look for professionals and make them their mentors, so that before they even get a job, they have some idea about the practical environment. And also, they should also diffuse their mind of the notion that I am a degree holder. So when I'm employed, I have to be at the top or the manager. And sometimes when they come and they see people who are not degree holders on the job, they think that they are better off than those people. You are not better off than them. If anybody has worked in an environment for 5 years and the person is diligent, is as equal or better than somebody who has a first degree. If the person has worked in an environment for 10 years and above, and is diligent and is good at it, is better than someone who have come from university with a master's degree. So they have to diffuse their mind of that notion. They have to be patient and learn, go through the process, go through the steps, and they will get to where they want to go. So it is not only for the industry leaders, it's not only for government. Government will do its part. Private sector will do its part to provide opportunity for people to get jobs to do. But when you are given the opportunity, you have to know that you must start from somewhere. I started from the warehouse. I did receiving of materials. I did picking. I did beaning. I started from somewhere. So our graduates, and I was a graduate. So our graduates should be humble enough to take jobs that are entry-level jobs to start from there. We should be humble enough to take on entry-level roles. And we should also be mindful that building the career, building the brand is not a day's job. Along our career journey, we should make integrity our key value. With that, we'll be able to get to the height that we want to get to. When we see people successful, we should be happy for them. And then we should not wish to be them, because we don't know what they've gone through, but we should wish to be better than them. But we should also know that it takes time to get to the height that those people have gotten to. Thank you. And they'll go far. That's my advice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your words. I know that this will go a long way to help somebody who come across this particular audio, whether on YouTube or on my podcast platform. So thank you so much, Atoapem, and I'm really grateful. Thank you so much, Senior Director Atoapem Frimpong Barima. Thank you so much. So he has been my guest on the Procurement Podcast with Enim Ado, and I'm always your host, Joseph Enim Ado. And I would like you to know that I work with the Source One Management Services Limited, where I am there as the procurement officer and also double as the consultant doing a training for people in the procurement supply chain across the country. So if you have any training needs for your company, you can just reach out to me, and then we would have plan, and we have various personnel across different subject areas, and we can train your employees or professionals in whatever aspect that you seek. So you can reach out to me on 0203-139001, and we'll have a chat. So thank you, and we will catch up next time. And also subscribe to my channel on YouTube and on Spotify. So I'm on Spotify as the Procurement Podcast with Enim Ado. I'm on Apple Podcast too as the Procurement Podcast with Enim Ado. On LinkedIn, my name is Joseph Enim Ado, and on YouTube, the name is the Procurement Podcast with Enim Ado. So once I upload on all these platforms, you can have access to our chats, and then any feedback, any comments can be made over there. So thanks for following me. Thanks for subscribing, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.